Hello neighbors, it's Brad here at eTrailer, and today we're taking a look at installing the ARB Safari Snorkel on a 2023 Jeep Gladiator. When it comes to overlanding, depending on where you go, it could be just a simple trail that you're camping at, or you could be really roughing it out in the middle of nowhere. And with nature, you really don't know what you're going to get into, and some of that can be a creek crossing or water that may be pretty high, and that runs the risk of hydrolocking the engine while you're out on the trails, which could make for a really rough time trying to get this vehicle out. And the Snorkel really just allows you to get air to the engine safely. Even if the water levels rise, it's going to keep that water out of the engine because this is a completely sealed system. Now, something to keep in mind too is just because you can get air to the engine driving through the water, you may have to take into account things like a rear diff breather or transmission. So just because you can save the engine from getting water doesn't mean that the Jeep's just ready to go through it. But either way, this is a great way to make sure when you do get to those creek crossings, you're not going to be stuck. Now, functionality's sake, this is designed by ARB. They're out of Australia, where the outback truly is where overlanding began because you're really left to nature and the wild. Whereas in the US, our overlanding, especially here in the Midwest, really this isn't going to be something that you use regularly, but there are applications for it. And if that's the case, this is a great kit for it. Now, either way though, it really does take the vehicle to the next level as far as really giving it that look. And a lot of times with overlanding, that's kind of the case with a lot of the accessories. You really get that look, but again, there is functionality with this. The kit comes with a lot of the hardware that you're going to need to get it all installed, and it's all really high quality. They've really done a lot of thought into designing this kit. You know, simple stuff like a clip for your antenna so it's not flapping around. And the fit and finish is really nice, including the bezel and the templates that they give you to modify everything and make sure that it lines up properly. Now, with that being said, there are going to be quite a few tools that you're going to want to have handy to make sure that this goes well, because this is kind of one of those installs. Once you're halfway through modifying your airbox, your vehicle is not really going to be able to be driven until you're completely done. So with that being said, things that I'd recommend: a good rivet gun. A hand one would work just fine, especially in some of the tighter spots, but there's quite a bit of rivets involved in the entire process, so having a good gun to be able to get that done is going to be key. Something else that they don't include but recommend is going to be a polyurethane adhesive, and that's going to seal up some of the spots not only on the hood where you cut, but also on the airbox to get that watertight seal. They recommend a Sikaflex 277. I wasn't able to get that at any stores locally, but you can find it online. So if you are jumping into this installation, I would highly recommend picking that up. I was able to find an alternative at the local hardware store, but if you want to go with their instructions, you might want to get that ahead of time. Now, with that, you're also going to be cutting this portion of the hood, so some good blades and a lot of painter's tape. Painter's tape is really going to protect everything throughout this whole process to make sure you don't damage anything while just trying to get it installed. But a lot of it is just going to be taking your time. This is definitely a measure a couple times, cut once kind of deal. And overall, if it's going to be a trail rig that may have some bumps and bruises, it's not that scary. But on a fairly new vehicle, this was an install that made me a little bit nervous. The finished product really turned out well, and I'm happy with it overall. But again, this may be something that you don't want to tackle at home if you don't have maybe some fabrication skills or just not afraid to jump in and do something. You can reach out to dealers like Axle Boy. That's a local shop that we use that does specifically off-road things, and this is right in their wheelhouse. And you can find a shop just like that by using our dealer locator. That way you can get your snorkel installed. But if you are doing this yourself at home, follow along. I'm going to give you some tips and tricks and walk you through the steps to make sure you get your snorkel installed on your Gladiator. Now, once you get your snorkel installed, take some pictures during the install process as well. If you find anything that was helpful, tips, tricks, whatever you may have, leave a comment. We love to see pictures, especially some off-roading pictures with this in action, and share it with us in the comments. This is definitely something that really takes this to the next level of off-road, and so whether you're going through hell or high water, this may be a great option for your Gladiator. To begin our installation, we're going to get our hood opened up and we're going to get this duct out of the way. Eventually, we're going to have to take that out as well as the airbox. So if you wanted to get the airbox out now, it's not a bad time to do that. We're also going to be removing some fender bolts. So right now I have an 8mm socket and a 10mm socket. For this duct, it does look like it's bolted into the Airbox with an 8mm, so I'll get that taken out first. And all of the hardware that we remove, I recommend having a nice organized spot to keep it. It'll make reinstallation of everything a lot easier as we progress on the install. Now, to get the rest of the duct off, we do want to start removing the air filter housing. We're going to be doing modification to this eventually, so it's a good step to just get this all removed. I've never actually removed one of these on a Jeep, and the instructions really don't tell you exactly how to do it, but that's okay. We're going to figure it out. So at the top, there's going to be a few more 8mm screws. We'll get those removed. Now, once you get those off, it does kind of lock into the bottom portion. We're going to get this hose clamp loosened up. That way we can remove this whole top filter housing, make it a lot easier. And then from here, you should be able to just kind of pull this out. Now, at this point, you can pull your air filter out, and what you're going to want to do is kind of reach down to where that duct is and just kind of pull up. There's going to be some tabs that it pops into, and you're going to have to put some force onto it, but you'll see that these are just some alignment tabs that pop in to the bottom there, but really that's going to be the only thing holding it in place. So we are going to be doing some modification to this a little bit later. We'll go ahead and just set this aside for now. Now we'll head to our fender bolts. We're going to have 3 of them that we're going to remove. 10mm socket's going to accomplish that. Now we're going to be putting some painter's tape right below where that was. So as we're mocking everything up, we're not scratching the paint. And we're going to be using quite a bit of painter's tape as we are going to be marking everything out, getting our templates in place. So it would be worthwhile having a nice big roll of it, as we are going to be using quite a bit. So I'm just going to tape along this edge and just make sure that this is protected. And the spot that we're going to be cutting out for our snorkel to go in is going to be in this vicinity. And so what we want to do is make sure that we have painter's tape along this entire edge. And that's going to help protect if a blade kind of walks off from scratching paint, but also it's going to help keep a nice clean edge as you cut, so the paint's not going to be flaking as we cut. So what we need to do is cover an area that's they say 300mm to 200. I went ahead and did the math for you, and it's roughly about 12 by 8. So we'll lay strips of tape 12 long and 8 high, and you can go a little bit more. It's not going to hurt anything, but we're going to make sure that we have this laid down properly. And I'd recommend try to get any wrinkles out. So right here, not happy with that. We want it nice and flat because we're going to be using this as a template, and so as we're making those lines, we want to make sure it's not going to catch on these, and it'll just be a lot easier if it is smooth. Now I've used the box that actually came with the hardware and put it underneath, and that way we can kind of get a nice wrap underneath it, and we're going to keep that in place as we put our template. And to get our template in place, this back edge we're going to line up. You'll see the rounded edge should go to the rounded edge of the hood, and we're going to get this corner nice and squared up because this is going to set the tone for the rest of it. So once we have it on that outside edge, I'll grab some painter's tape and tape that down. And as we go, you'll see, make sure that you're kind of taping this as we go to iron out any of the the spots. But the main thing is we get this to where it's also flat, because this is going to be the spot where we drill for our rivets. So I'll start taping up our template, and you can go ahead and grab a ballpoint pen. That way we can mark those spots out. I got my template in place. Everything's flat on the bottom. That's what we're really looking for. There's no real, anything that we need to iron out. It's sitting right. So I'm prolonging having to cut here, but I'm really just making sure that we have this dialed in properly. And we're going to just trace this so we have a nice outline of where we're going to be cutting. And along with that, we also need to mark out those rivet holes. So you can go ahead and do that. Once marked out, you can remove the template. Now, since we are going to be cutting, we want to make sure that we don't get metal kind of anywhere on our paint. That can become oxidized, and it can cause damage to your paint. So I just grabbed a trash bag, cut it open to make a drop, just a drop cloth. So if you have something, painter's drop cloth or whatever, that's going to work. This is also twofold too, because we have, the induction open by the throttle body where we took that intake off. we don't want any metal going in there. So this is just a nice added barrier to prevent anything from happening. So I'm gonna get this all taped up. The 3 holes that we marked out, we're gonna drill out using a pilot bit first. And that's just to make sure that it doesn't start walking on us. A small drill bit will go through here and allow us to enlarge it with a 5mm drill bit later on. So I'll get these drilled out first. Now 5mm, if you don't have metric drill bits, it's going to end up being about a 13/64 is almost 5mm. So ideally you have that 5mm, but this is going to work for us. So we're going to go back to those same holes and just enlarge them. Those holes enlarged, we're going to grab our support bezel and we're going to put this in place, and we'll grab the black-headed rivets and we're just going to put those in there as a placeholder. It's going to kind of keep everything nice and aligned, and that's going to allow us to mark out the other holes. So with your marker or pen, we'll get those marked out. With those marked out, we can remove our rivets and the bezel, and then we'll just take that pilot hole and then just continue drilling as we've done before. So starting with that pilot hole and then enlarging it. So with those enlarged, I went ahead and I put extra protection around just the paint. Anywhere where a spark or metal shavings could get is something that you're going to want to make sure that you protect. Now, as far as cutting it, they say to use a specialty blade, and I think, yeah, it does have some bearing that it would make sense to do that. But if you're stuck with just kind of the basic tools, this is one that obviously you want to make sure that it turns out clean. That bezel is going to cover a decent amount of it, but something to remember is as you reach back here, it's double layered. So we're going to be cutting not only from the outside layer of metal, but also that inside portion. So it's going to get a little bit interesting here. I'm going to attempt to use, I believe an angle grinder is going to be a good option. The main thing is you're not going to let it walk all over you. And I think just kind of cutting along that edge, we're going to come back later with a file. So you don't have to be perfect, but you can always shave off a little bit of extra. These corners might get a little bit tricky. I could see how maybe using a hole saw might work. And that might be something I get to. As we start to cut this, I'm going to kind of determine the best way to do it, but really it comes down to what tools do you have. So I'm going to start with my angle grinder and see where it gets us. Now, this should go without saying, but we have this propped up. Make sure that you have enough space to kind of get your hand back here, and that the box that you're using isn't going to cause issue, because we do want to make sure that we cut all the way through that metal. Now, these trash bags here, a couple hot sparks and it's going to burn. So you may want to put an extra layer of something down that's not going to cause any melting through this. So I'm going to grab something extra just for a little added protection, and then we continue on with our cutting. Now, Dremel might be another good option for getting these radiused edges. I'm going to use a multi-tool. I've had a lot of luck with these generally. And again, as long as I stay on this inside portion, we should be okay, because I can always come back with a file. Now, you might see that we have the outer portion cut, but our angle grinder blade was not enough to get through there, so I have a reciprocating air saw that we have that hopefully we can buzz through this. If not, I may just kind of cut this out, and that's going to give us that template to follow that along to be able to cut it out. But either way, I'm cutting on the inside, so we can always come back again with that file and clean everything up. So we'll see if we can't get this notched out. So with that cut out, overall I'm pretty happy with it, but obviously I've left a little bit of sanding to do. We want to make sure we get all those burrs knocked down and it nice and clean, because we are going to want to paint this surface. It's raw exposed metal. It can become rust pretty quickly unless you protect it. So Before I get to that point, I am going to grind this down. I'm using a grinding wheel, and then I have a flappy paddle blade that I'm going to use on here that's just going to kind of smooth it all out. If you have a deburr tool or some files, you can definitely use that as well. I'll probably end up using those in conjunction with this, but this is going to get us exactly where we need to be, or pretty close to it. So I went and kind of grinded things down. I went with my file, getting the big burrs taken off. I do want to make sure that our edges look really clean overall. So we're going to go ahead and get this tape taken off. And something else we're going to be doing is where we drilled out for our rivets, we're also going to try to get those burrs knocked down as well, because as you put that rivet in, you don't want any flashing causing issue to where that rivet's not going to seat properly. So once we get this peeled off, we'll just start kind of cleaning this up. And any metal shavings, they say to use compressed air. I'm going to use a vacuum. So if you have a shop vac, just kind of get everything cleaned out. Any metal that could go in here, we want to make sure that we're not sealing raw metal in. That can become rust long term. So really just make sure that we have a clean working space and that all of our edges are looking nice before we move along. And once you get the metal shavings kind of cleared out of here, vacuumed up, or used compressed air, we do want to touch this all up. So if you have touch-up paint, great. Now, most of that bezel is going to cover a lot of these raw edges. This is really just for protection. So as far as what color you use, try to get it to paint match as best as you can. But being that this is white, a white paint marker is probably going to be a good option, because instead of having any overspray, we can just simply run this along the edge and get paint coated on all of it. So just make sure anywhere where we've cut, we're getting this coated up with paint. The same goes for the rivet holes. So that's why it's nice to have a paint marker. You can just kind of coat that up this way. So we'll go through and get this all coated up properly. Now you're going to want to grab your adhesive. Now what they require or mention to use is going to be the Sikaflex 277. What we'll do is we're going to put just a bead around our bracket here that we have. And this will help seal everything up once we get our rivets in. You don't have to get too heavy on it, but just kind of coat that up and put a little more. And then you can grab those black rivets, because we're going to place this, get it riveted on. It might be worthwhile just kind of riveting down the corners first, but the big thing is making sure everything's going to line properly. So that's why we're going to make sure that they all fit. So when you use a rivet gun, you've never used one before, just make sure it's properly flush against the metal as you start to rivet it in. Now we need to grab the inserts, and this is going to go into the gap between the two metal portions on the hood, and they are going to be specific. They have slightly different shapes. They're not completely different, but you'll see that there's little insets for where the rivet goes. So the tab portion will face towards the outside. So we have this one up front and then this one in the back. And what we're going to do is use that same adhesive silicone or the urethane, and we're going to just create a bead to kind of fill this and get it to stick in place. So that way we have water not going directly in here. It'll kind of keep this nice and tight. So I'm going to get this, just a bead around this inside. We'll get this in place. And if you want to, along this outside edge, you could go ahead and fill that up as well. And if you have any excess silicone, you can go ahead and wipe that out now. Now we're going to be tackling our Airbox, and there's going to be quite a few modifications that we're going to be doing to get everything all sealed up and get our new tube that's going to go to our snorkel in place. So the first thing we're going to do is grab the Airbox, and we're going to remove the factory duct. So this is just a series of little clips here. So if you just push in, and sometimes what you can do is push, and then if you use another screwdriver, you can kind of pry this back. What I recommend doing is just kind of work on one corner, and with a large flathead, using twisting kind of motion here between these gaps, that's going to keep pressure on it. So when we do push the clips, it's going to pop that out. They're a little bit tricky here, so just take your time. And we were able to get that to all slide out. So Now the next thing you're going to want to do is grab your templates. And these are all on this piece of paper. We're going to get these cut out. You can use a razor blade to cut those little edges, so that way they're going to be nice and clean. So get these all separated. Now I've marked out where we're going to be removing ribs, and the instructions lay it out pretty well, but essentially this first big rib that we have here, and then the bottom portion we're going to be cutting out, and that's going to allow eventually this to seat properly, and so part of that is going to be cutting these out. Now you can use a grinder, you can use a lot of different things on this. I've found that a multi-tool works really well on these, getting a nice clean line, and we're going to get it nice and flush to the plastic, so make sure you don't cut into it, but trim off these ribs. So that's what we're going to do. So I went ahead and grabbed our first template, and it's going to go on the lower portion of the ducting that goes in, and we have 3 spots. They use a ballpoint pen. I'm going to use a paint marker so visually we can see this once our template's gone. And once we get that marked out, we can remove our template. Now we're going to grab our template. Now there's going to be 2 of them that look fairly similar. Grab the one with the 90 degree, not the curve, and we're going to be putting it on this side. And we put tape here because not only are we going to be marking out where we're going to drill, but also this cut line. So you'll see the bottom portion of our template should line up with the bottom of the square. Where there was a rib, that has an inset, so just kind of butt it up against this rib here, and we'll mark out our drill spot, and then we're also going to mark this. Now it's going to go all the way here, so we should know that that's where we're cutting, but just follow this path. Now on the other side, it's going to be very similar. We have that notched corner, but it's going to line roughly about the same. So we'll mark that drill spot and then also where we're going to be cutting. On each of the upper sides where we trim the ribs, we have very similar looking templates. So same thing, align that. You'll see those notches should go where those ribs were originally. So once we have that lined up, I put tape behind it. We'll mark these 2 drill spots out. And then we're just going to repeat that same process on the other side with our template, so we'll get that in place. Now on the inlet side, we have our long template. Same thing, we're going to line these up with those ribs, and we'll mark these. And if you're keeping track at home, this is 13 spots that we marked out. So at this point, we're going to drill them out using the 4.5 millimeter drill bit. I have a 3/16, which is going to put us about 4 millimeters, so I might need to work those open a little bit more. It's going to make it easier for those rivets to go in place. Now, if you don't have a 4 millimeter drill or a 4.5 millimeter drill bit, we're going to kind of make this work. So I'll grab my drill, and we're just going to go through and get everything drilled out. Now the sections that we marked out with that kind of arc here, this is all going to get cut out. You'll see they left the corner here, so just cut along that bottom line there. So we'll get this all notched out, and then we're going to come back and file that down. Now we're going to add tape along this edge on both sides, and this is going to become another drill point, and we're going to be using the new duct from our kit to make sure that it lines up. So what we're going to do is slide this into place. You're going to see all those holes that we drilled that should line up pretty spot on. And what we'll do is grab our rivets, and we're going to just dry fit them in. That way it holds it all in place, and then we'll be able to mark these out and drill. So our hose is all fit with our rivets in place, just holding it here. And to mark through this might be a little bit difficult, so I'm going to swap to a small drill bit and just directly run through the rubber, making sure to not make contact. And really, as long as you can make a spot on that masking tape, that's going to be what we're looking for. Now we're going to trim out these inside ribs right by the inlet, and we're going to just make this nice and flush. So cut all that out with whatever method you're using. Now once cut out, it is kind of tricky to get just a nice, clean, flat cutting portion. So what I'm doing is using a burr bit. I'm just going to grind this all down to where it's flush. So now that we have that all nice and clean looking, we're going to have plastic shavings in here. And obviously we don't want any of that going into our air filter or into the engine long term. So you may want to soak this in some soapy water. We got some buildup in ours. I have some compressed air. I'm just going to blow this out, make sure it's nice and clean. We're going to get ready to put our hose onto our Airbox, and we're going to want to apply a good amount of the sealant adhesive that we used on the hood all around, and I'm going to be doing it on our rubber as well. And that way when we put it all together, it's going to seal everything up. We're then going to start to put some of our rivets in place, and it's important that we follow the exact way that they have them set up. There's also going to be some of the brackets that go in place. First things first though, let's get this gooped up. And if you can do a nice consistent bead where there's no voids, our main goal is to make this as watertight as possible. So if we do it on the housing as well as that hose, I think we're really going to be covered. And if there's excess coming out, if it's over the top, crazy, that's not a bad thing. Again, it's going to seal everything, and this should still be wet by the time we get our rivets in. So if we want to, we can just run our finger and just kind of seal everything up. So I'm going to get my bottom brace, so get this in line, and then we'll get this riveted up first. So I got everything attached, and I went through and kind of just filled up a little bit more of the gaps. Take your time and get it as clean as possible. This wasn't the prettiest look, but functionality-wise, this thing's solid, and I don't think we're going to have any leaks. So along with that, we have our brackets that we put in place here. And then as you do these bottom ones, make sure that you put the washers in place so that rivet has something to bite into. And that's why we use that bracket that's here, here, and here. You may notice that we have our hardware, the small little button head screw. That's going to go in, and we have a washer and our nylon lock nut. So everything's tight, everything's in place. Now underneath there's 4 spots, 1, 2, 3, 4, that I also filled up, and that's going to make it watertight. So I held it up to the light, make sure we don't have any light going through here because we want it watertight. So those I have sealed up. Again, I just took some of the excess and kind of smeared it around the seams. So I'm pretty sure I could put this in water and we're not going to have any issues. So now we can get this back in place. These alignment tabs, they can be a little bit tough to push in, so I recommend spraying them with silicone lube before popping them in. Now it's time to get our brackets on the snorkel. So we have our center bracket, we have this front bracket, and then there's also one that's going to be up top here. Now this one is a little bit unique, so what we'll do is make sure that we have those 3 holes facing out, and then also you'll see that there's a bend, so I'm going to have this bend kind of going up. So the hardware we're going to be using is going to be our Torx bit. You'll see in the pack that there's 2 smaller ones. That's going to go with this, so I'll just thread those in for now. And these are slotted. We are going to tighten them down though to get it all centered up, and that's going to be the case for all of the brackets. So I'm just going to get them all started first, and then the remaining brackets, the other 2 are going to get the larger screws. So let's get those all started. So we'll just make sure these are centered up, and our larger bolts are going to be a T40 Torx bit. So we'll get those snug. And they're brass fitting, so you don't have to get crazy. It should just bottom out fairly quickly. And we'll just go through and tighten down the rest. Now when you get to those top ones, they're going to be a little bit smaller. These are going to be a T27 is what I found works well. Now that top bracket is going to go somewhere along the lines of this window frame. So I put a piece of tape along here, And what we're going to do is measure 8 millimeters from the gaps. And it's a 150 millimeter gap that we're going to be measuring that up. And that's just to kind of account to make sure that bracket goes along here. But what we'll do is I have my caliper, I have it on the edge. I'm just going to make lines every so often. And then I'm going to come back with a ruler and get this a definite line. So that way we know exactly where we need to get this drilled into. Now on this top part, this is where it's going to mount up to the A-pillar. And so to get our bracket in place, we need to make sure that we have it in the proper orientation. So the slotted part will go towards our brass fittings. The bend is going to kind of curl around it. So that's going to contour up to that window. And you'll see it's got a slight upswing. So just make sure that that's going towards the where the opening will be. And then to get these in place, we'll center it up, and I used a T27 to snug them down, so we'll get this tightened down. Now the fun part, we get to mock this up. I'm sure you already have just to see what it looks like, but we're going to be doing that with those factory bolts that we removed from the fender. So as we do that, I'm going to feed our snorkel into the opening of our hose. And then I'm going to get my brackets aligned to where I can thread in our hardware. And the whole reason we're doing this, we are going to be taking it off, is to get our bracket exactly where we need it to be so we can start drilling on the A-pillar. So I am going to snug this down, make sure that this is exactly where it's going to live. Now, when it comes to getting that all fit around your bezel here, you want to make sure that the gaps are even. Now, I'm running into a little bit of issue with it being tight on the backside. Now you can loosen up the brackets and slide them as well as the fender bolts, and that should give you enough wiggle room to be able to get that properly aligned. Ours, we're a little bit off. It's obviously able to close, but it's not something that's going to rub against that. So I'm going to have to modify my slots just a little bit. I'm going to open them up, and that way we can get this perfectly aligned, and everything's going to look a little bit better when trying to close it. So hopefully you don't run into that issue. Followed all the templates. There's not a whole lot else I don't think I could have done different. So I really think it's just going to be just a little modification just to make sure that this fits properly, but it's all going to be structurally sound. Now once you've made sure that your hood closes, we're going to come back to our back bracket, and we should have all of the holes aligning with that mark that we made previous. And now we're going to mark where our brackets are, top and bottom. And with that marked, we can remove the snorkel from the fender, and we're going to be removing that upper bracket as we're going to start getting the drilling portion ready on the window. So we'll just get everything taken off. Now at this point, you are going to need to get your front windshield to lower down. If you've never done that on your Jeep, it's actually fairly easy to do. You'll take off your hard top panels like we had, lower down your sun visors, and there's going to be 4 T40 Torx bits that you're going to remove. Now you can take off the wipers. We attempted to pry them off, and they're not that simple. So what I did is I just used a cam buckle strap to kind of harness this up, and the main thing is we're able to gain access because we're going to run hardware through here. But there's also going to be a drain tube in here that we want to make sure that we're not hitting. So there's going to be some insulation we'll just peel back. Now's a good time to also tape up some of your, the window and the dash. You want to make sure that we don't have any shavings going through once we drill this. But what we'll do is we'll grab our bracket, and we're going to hold it up to where we marked, and then mark out those holes so we can drill those out. And we should align with that line that we made previous. And again, as I mentioned, before we start drilling this out, we're going to use a 5.5 millimeter drill bit. You want to peel back this foam that's on the backside with the tube. Make sure that it's going to be clear back there so we don't puncture anything in the process. Now I'm going to start with a pilot hole, so we can always enlarge it, but we'll get these drilled through. I'm just going to hold back here, make sure my finger's out of the way, but make sure our tube doesn't get damaged. Now we'll come back with a 7/32, which is 5.5 millimeters, and we'll enlarge these. Now at this point, you can vacuum up any shavings, knock down any burrs, and then I'm going to take a little touch-up paint and just coat anything, again, just to kind of prevent any water from causing corrosion long term. Now grab your bracket. There's going to be a rubber gasket that's included. We're going to put that with the hardware holding that in place. This is going to rest against the metal. And when we pass these through, we're going to finish it up with a flat washer and a nylon lock nut. Now it is time to get our snorkel officially installed. So grab your silver hose clamp, and we're going to be clamping that around the tube, so just make sure that fits around. Now's a good time to remove the tape that we have on our fenders. Feed your snorkel on, and you'll see this lip. That's where that hose clamp needs to go. So just make sure you have it all the way in there. And before I tighten mine down, I'm going to get everything bolted up, and then we can snug this down so it really holds it in exactly where we want it. So we'll get our fender washers in place. So we got this all secured. Double check your hood clearance, and then we can head up to our bracket, and we're going to grab our torque screws and get those in place. We'll start them by hand, and then we'll get them tightened down. Now on our snorkel, you may notice that the antenna kind of goes through the molded portion, but it is going to flap around. So you might have noticed this clip. This is going to keep our antenna in place. So I put some tape here, and you use measurements. You're going to find them in the instruction manual. And I think they're pretty close, but honestly, mock this up, hold the clip in place, and I think that's going to be your best option. So we'll drill through here with a 4.5 millimeter drill bit, and then we're going to be using the black rivets so it's a nice clean look, and we're also going to be putting washers on the back side as we pop those in. So you know the drill. Let's get this done. With our clip in place, grab your black hose clamp, and now we can slide this in, and we'll see our antenna should clip in here with a little force. And then just get this exactly where you want it, tighten down your hose clamp, and then from there, you just need to reinstall the Airbox, your air filter, all the factory stuff. But that's gonna do it. Now it's just time to go test this thing out and put it under some water. And that was a look and installation of the ARB Safari Snorkel on a 2023 Jeep Gladiator.